We think of phrases like run the show, call the shots, hold the reins, rule the roost, large and in charge, the boss, and commander-in-chief. Well, we know before we even hear the stories of Advent, before we hear about peasant girls and carpenters, about shepherds and a tiny little village called Bethlehem, is that Jesus will not be like those other kings. He will be like no other president, prime minister, or king that we've ever seen. This Jesus doesn't act like he's supposed to. He's that backward king. He kneels at the feet of his followers. Think about that. These are his followers, and he kneels at their feet and washes their feet for them. He talks to women at the well who are obviously there by themselves for a very important reason that society has deemed they should not be with others. He speaks to her. He speaks to a woman who's about to be stoned to death and acts like she's an actual human being. Jesus does these things where he sits down at meals with people who aren't going to help advance his career in any way, shape, or form. And then, from Rome's capital punishment, he offers words of forgiveness to the very ones who caused him to be crucified. He forgives them all. He says, God, forgive them. This is bigger than anything that humans are capable of, and in the name of you, I ask you to free them from this. This is the backward king. This is what servant king looks like, and that's what we celebrate this day. It's so easy to get into power and prestige and names and titles, and Jesus reminds us what it means to be given power. I love all the Spider-Man movies. I've watched them all at least 100 times, but I love the line from the first one, with great power comes great responsibility. This is given to Jesus, and what he does with it is not trying to make it about him, but to remind us what the kingdom of God looks like. The passage from Colossians reminds us of the universal love that God has for all of creation. That's all of creation. Not just who we deem to be the chosen, but all of creation. But there's also this sense of intimacy, that this God loves us for who we are as individuals. It reminds us in this lesson about being reconciled. Have you ever had a conflict with someone, and then you reconciled? We are transformed in that. It becomes a new relationship. Yes, it was severed and it was broken, but there's a transformation. And we are promised that this God transforms us as individuals and institutions. Even the church can be transformed. I always wonder, though, throughout history, the way the church has acted, if Jesus just throws up his hands and said, if you'd quit talking about me so much and start acting like me, everything would change. He came and he showed us what a leader and a savior looks like. There's a legend from a monastery in France. This monk was well known for being an extraordinary leader in the way Jesus leads. And people wanted to learn how to be like him. So monks decided to travel there. There was about 8 of them. They decided to travel to see him. It would take many, many days, a few weeks. They took off, and the first days, they bickered among themselves. It was time to set up camp. Who would get the firewood? Who would start the fire? Who would get the food? Who would set up their lodging? We've all been there, right? About day 4, another monk joined them. And whenever there were jobs to do, he'd readily do them. Whenever they were bickering, he would just get it done. And what happened was it transformed everyone. By the time they arrived at the monastery, the days went well, including setting up camp and breaking camp. They get to the door, and they knock on the door, and the monk who comes, they say, we'd like to meet Brother Leo. And he starts to laugh. He says, he's right there. He's with your group. He was the one who would join them. Often we forget that to be a follower of Jesus, to lead Jesus' style, is to be among each other. It doesn't mean we're better. It doesn't mean we're worse. We walk along beside each other and share the gifts we have. Dwayne Elmer wrote, power is meant to be shared with the goal of empowering others. Hoarded power weakens others and exalts oneself. Power, when grounded in biblical values, serves others by liberating them. It acknowledges that people bear the image of God and treats them in a way that will nurture the development of that image. In so doing, we honor our Creator. Most of us now, when a president is elected, at least until we have a woman president, we think of what the First Lady would do. There seems to always be a cause. There's a cause or something she takes up. This was not true prior to Eleanor Roosevelt. Eleanor Roosevelt transformed what first women were expected or what they could do with that position. She served as a delegate for 7 years to the United Nations. She served on the United Nations Human Rights Commission, and she helped write the 1948 Human Rights Declaration that we still refer to today. She redefined what it was to be the First Lady or the first person. She advocated for rights of Asian and African Americans. She helped refugees who were displaced during World War II find a home and find security. And she worked for women to have a place in the workplace and in society. Before she died, she was described as one of the most esteemed women in the world, and her work and legacy still are a cornerstone to a lot of how we act and how we treat one another. Many of us in this room lived through the AIDS scare in the 1980s. When it hit the stage in the early 80s, there were a lot of myths out about AIDS. A lot of myths that many people bought into. In the U.S., in the early 80s, 50% of Americans thought people with AIDS should be quarantined. We thought that you could get AIDS by touching someone's hand or by sitting on a chair they'd sat on. Princess Diana went to visit the clinic they had in London, and she transformed the world because what she did was touch the hands of the patients without a rubber glove. Historians say it was one of the biggest movements in the world because to watch someone like Princess Diana reach out and touch someone's hand alleviated the fears that so many people had. All she did was touch somebody. This is what servant leadership looks like. We might not start a movement, we might not change everything that's unjust, but we reach out and we touch a hand. We share from the gifts we've been given, whether we're the First Lady or whether the janitor at St. Mark's. Peggy Heyman said, "Love may challenge and love may correct, but love will never shame. Love may call us to uncomfortable places, but love will never cast us aside. Love may demand, but will never demean. Love will never ask us to dim our own light, lest we shine too brightly. Love will never ask us to be less than we were created to be." And once again, Spider-Man line, with great power comes great responsibility. If we are super talented, then we just invite others into that with us. It's not about outshining others, it's about helping others to see their God-given gifts. There was a lacrosse coach who was asked to come to a pretty prestigious college, but they had a horrible lacrosse team. Coach Brubacher took the call, but then he tried to recruit great players. He wanted to change their record. They'd gone 10 years losing more games than they had won. There was this outstanding lacrosse player named Stephen, and he was asked to be on the team. They kept trying to recruit him, and Stephen kept saying, "Just wait, just wait." So colleges kept coming, trying to offer a better offer than Coach Brubacher could offer. Finally, in the fall, Stephen said, "I'll verbally sign on, but I won't actually sign a piece of paper until the spring." The coach kept trying, all these other schools kept coming and watching him, and finally spring came and he signed the contract. The 17-year-old stood before cameras, and this is what he said. "Coach, I don't know if you've noticed, but a lot of colleges come to see me play each week. Most of my teammates weren't getting scholarship offers or even being recruited earlier this year, but now they are. By me not committing anywhere, all the college coaches who kept coming to see me play got a chance to discover how good some of my teammates really are. If I had signed early with you, all the other coaches would have stopped coming to the games, and none of my teammates would have gotten recruited." This is Jesus-style leadership. It might not always get us in the Hall of Fame, but we might get that contract. We might get that award. But the point of our gifts is to share them. It's always more affirming to be in community with each other than it is to stand alone. There are those in the world, though, who will always try to run the show, who will call the shots, charge and be the boss. And then there's Jesus. Living and leading as people of God, we find that the only authentic way to be in relationship with God and each other is to love, to show mercy, to act with kindness, to work for justice, and to try to learn to forgive. To follow Jesus, we live, we share, we eat, we speak, we work for justice, and we roll up our sleeves. We get our hands dirty. Sometimes it gets our hearts broken. But always, always we find there are others with us. Faith is never a solo event. Jesus invites us to come and follow, and then we turn to each other and we speak those words that we're not going to sing in a hymn. Will you let me be your servant? Let me be as Christ to you. Pray that I may have the grace to let you be my servant too. Amen.